Please remember there are additional resources and things such as code samples at elithecomputerguy.com. So if you're watching one of these classes and you need to know what code looks like, or if you need links to the resources that we're using, please go to elithecomputerguy.com and take a look at our class posting there. Also, please remember that free to the end user classes are not actually free. It costs me a lot of money to be able to provide this type of content. So if you could click on the donate button and throw in a couple of dollars every month, this will help me be able to continue to provide you this type of material. Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli, the computer guy, and today's class is learning about the venv virtual environment in Python. So one of the things that we've talked about in this Python programming series is that in Python, if you want to do almost anything, you're going to need to import a module, right? So if you want a random number, something as simple as a random number, you're going to have to import the random module into your script and then call the randint function. If you want to simply have your script pause for 1 or 2 seconds for whatever reason, to do something as simple as that, you're going to have to import the time module and then use the sleep function out of it, right? And so this is actually a very powerful thing because you can add modules, not just simply from the standard modules that come with Python, but you can also download and install modules from pypy.org, where they have 500,000 packages up on that website. And so if you want to do almost anything, all you have to do is pip3 install whatever that package name is, and voila, you will have access to the modules and all the functions within that package very quickly and easily. The problem is, in this kind of design style, is what happens if you build one script that requires a very specific version of a module, right? So I don't know, whatever, some stupid module, right? So somebody writes a specific script to do something within your infrastructure, and when they write that script, they need to use one specific version of a module. As time goes by, for whatever reason, the people that are maintaining that module modify something in that module. And so therefore, later versions of that module will not work properly with your script. And so one of the problems that you run into is this script may need like version 2 of a module, and this script over here needs version 4 of a module, that type of thing. What do you do when both scripts are trying to run on one server? Well, that's where virtual environments come in. So basically what you're able to do is you're able to enter into a virtual environment. You are able to install all the packages that your particular script needs, and then you can run that script within that virtual environment so that it only has access to the modules and packages that you've given it access to. So basically you create a virtual environment for this script that needs version 2. You install version 2 of the module, the package, into that virtual environment, and then you run that script in that virtual environment. This script over here that needs version 4, you create a virtual environment that has version 4 in it, and then you run the script within that virtual environment. And so basically, both of these scripts are able to run on the exact same server. Again, this is one of the things we get into in the whole open source world, and why I irritate some people. I know, it's a shocker. What? You're a technology professional and you irritate people? I've never heard of that, right? But this is one of the places where I irritate people sometimes, because a lot of people like really just absolutely love open source. Basically, open source is the greatest thing to ever exist. There is nothing wrong with open source. Anybody that could ever get cranky and complain about open source is just a boomer, or whatever the current insult is, right? This is the kind of thing where it gets a little bit wonky with the open source community, is because since so many people are creating their own packages and they're maintaining them to whatever quality with whatever update cycle and whatever else, and that it's so easy to add that into Python scripts, you really do run into major problems where you will have a developer who, again, like 4 or 5 years ago, they designed a script that your infrastructure relies on. It's doing something. It's encoding images or videos. It's doing some kind of replication of database or files, right? But the thing is, when they designed that, they just went out there, they grabbed some package basically off of pypod.org, they shoved it into the script, and it's working. They didn't really think about how well it was going to get maintained. They didn't even really think of the quality of the package at the time. They just cared, is it functioning today? Again, a lot of programmers out there, all they care about is when they get done touching it, that their script works. They're not thinking about the next person that they're passing the script, the maintenance of the script onto, or again, somebody 5 years down the pike who now has to try to maintain and make sure that your script is running properly. And so one of the problems you can get to in the legacy environment is, again, you may have very vital scripts and they require very specific, not just modules, but versions of modules. And when you're trying to run all of these different scripts basically on the same server, basically what will solve this problem for you is virtual environments. One of the virtual environment options that are available is what's called venv. This is what we're going to be talking about today. And in most educational and standard, any kind of standard stuff that you're going to learn about virtual environments, this is most likely the package that you're going to be using. So what you're going to use today will be pretty useful for you. Okay. We're going to have to take a moment and talk about words. What, Eli? I don't want to talk about words. I would have been an English major if I wanted to talk about words. And maybe that's the problem. Maybe if we had a few more English majors in our profession, our language wouldn't be so stupid. But anyways, right, we have a lot of people creating a lot of amazing technology that don't have the best grasp on the English language. And so one of the big problems we get into in the technology world is when we're talking about any product or talking about any concept, words are used, and then it gets very confusing because then we use the same word for multiple things and we don't really explain what's going on, and it's a bit of a disaster. Again, it's like that whole the whole definition of pip, right? PIP is pip installs packages. Like, who the hell comes up with that abbreviation? What does pip stand for? Pip installs packages. Oh no, I get that, but what does pip stand for? Pip installs packages. It's like GNU Linux, GNU Linux. GNU, not Unix. Oh yeah, no, I get that, but what does GNU stand for? GNU, not Unix. But, oh, you get into Laurel and Hardy sessions pretty damn quickly. But it is important to understand what we're talking about when we're talking about things, virtual things, in the real world, and how this corresponds to virtual environments. So you most likely heard of things such as VPSs or virtual private servers. You most likely have heard of a product, something like Hyper-V in the corporate world for your own computer. You may have heard of VirtualBox or Parallels or VMware Fusion. You may have heard of VMware, that type of thing. And you may have heard of those names in relation to virtualization. It is important to understand what that virtualization means. So you have virtualizing an entire computer. And when you virtualize an entire computer, what you do is you take the operating system with all the configurations, TCP/IP configurations, the whole 9 yards, all the software installed, all of its configurations, and essentially you bundle all of that up into what is called an instance, which essentially is just a file. And then you can have that file put on a server. That server can then run that instance, and now you have a virtual machine running. So you can have a server or a desktop computer that is providing, whatever services that it would, but it's in that virtual instance and it can get moved around, right? So it might be in your local cloud infrastructure. It might be up on AWS or DigitalOcean. That type of thing. So when you talk about virtualizing an operating system, that is what we're talking about. When you talk about the web world, so you're talking about Nginx or Apache, you may have hear of something called vhosts or virtual hosts within the web administration world. Basically, what that means, it's separating different websites on one web server. So basically, right, if you have CNN.com and FoxNews.com and MSNBC.com, let's say all of those websites are being hosted on one server. So they go out to their DNS, they plug in the IP address for that server. Well, what happens is there's a vhosts file. When somebody comes in from the outside world, from the internet, they'll get to that server, they'll say, I'm going to CNN.com, and then it will drop them into the CNN.com folder. Or somebody else will be coming to FoxNews.com, and it'll drop them into the FoxNews.com folder, or MSNBC, and it'll drop it, right? So when you talk about vhosts files or virtual hosts within the web administration world, that is what we're talking about. You may have also heard of things like Linux containers. Linux containers is basically where you can take one Linux operating system and you can compartmentalize the operating system so that you can basically have standalone servers running on the exact same hardware. Containers are in fact different than virtual machines. That's its own deal, right? So when we talk about virtual, it is important to understand there are different products out there that basically do different things. But the main concept when we're talking about virtualization in the tech world is essentially that we're trying to compartmentalize, right? We are trying to use one piece of hardware or one server, but then be able to separate out different components so that they are not vulnerable from failings of other things on that server, or that they themselves hopefully can't compromise anything else on the server. Again, with virtual machines, with vhosts, the whole nine yards. When we talk about virtual environments then within Python, literally all we're doing is we're creating a little Python environment where we're able to install packages using pip3. And basically, when we use these virtual environments in Python, our script will only have access to whatever packages and modules that we've given it access to within that particular virtual environment. So this is very, very, very simple. Again, if you hear of virtualization and hear of like virtualizing an entire server, that's complicated, that's difficult. We're not doing anything close to that. Again, Linux containers, that's its own world. When we talk about Python virtual environments, all we're doing is we're essentially compartmentalizing the environments for these Python scripts so that they are only able to access exactly the packages and modules that we want them to be able to access. So before we get into the technical stuff with actually using venv and creating a virtual environment, I do want to take a moment to kind of talk about when should you use virtual environments. One of the big problems I see, especially in like the technology education world, is the way people are trained is that you should definitely do something one way and only that way and never do anything differently, which again just isn't how geeks operate. We do what we're gonna do, right? So one of the big things with virtual environments, if you're gonna use virtual environments, one of the big questions that you should be asking yourself is, are you going to be using this in a production environment, right? I talk about production environments a lot, and especially to new people, this may seem like I'm just saying a word over and over again, but it's something that you really need to be thinking about, right? When I talk about a production environment, it means you're working for a corporation or an organization, and the idea is that the infrastructure is going to outlast you. Now, hopefully you don't fall over from a heart attack. Though to be clear, with the average American diet, that's definitely a possibility, right? But the idea, right? You design something, you build something, you implement something, you deploy something. The idea is in a year or two when you get promoted, in a year or two when you go to take a job with some other corporation, right? At that point in time, you are going to need to hand off all of your work to the next person, to take over your duties. And so one of the things that you need to be thinking about is how can you make that as simple as possible. So one of the nice things with virtual environments is it can make life a lot simpler for that next person to take over your role. Because if you're running these scripts in virtual environments and you set up the virtual environment to be specific to that script, then when the next person has to maintain your script, again, let's say you add servers to the network or remove servers to the network, maybe they want to add an API call or whatever else. One of the things that they're going to have to do before they make any modifications is they're going to have to go through, take a look at your code, figure out what your code is actually doing to make sure they don't screw anything up when they make modifications. Well, if you have a virtual environment and basically you've created a script that, let's say, uses 3 packages. So they can go into the virtual environment, they do pip3 list, it lists those 3 packages. And so they know, okay, this script uses these 3 packages, and then they go into the script and they have a good idea of what's going on. And if they need to add any packages to that script, or for that script, they can just do pip3 install what they need, and it's one nice little container that is, wait for it, easy to understand. So easy to understand. Where, imagine, right, you have a server and you've written 20 scripts that maintain the network, do some kind of, something on the network, whatever else. And then, the next person that comes down the pike, they're going to have to go in to figure out basically how to modify one of those scripts. And when they do pip3 list, they're not listing the modules or the packages in one environment. They're listing all the packages that are on that server. And so each one of those 20 scripts, they all need 3 or 4 packages. And so you do pip3 list, and you're looking at 100 packages. And there's different versions, and there's different things going on. And then you open the script, and you're like, oh boy, what am I going to do now, right? Again, understanding what's going on can be very difficult. That is one of the biggest problems we run into as technology professionals is I know what I want to do. I know the commands to run. I'm just not sure when I run the commands that I want to run, what's going to happen to the server, right? The other thing too is, again, think about things like migrations, right? Let's say somebody created a script a year ago, nobody thought very much of it, and then there's something going on in the company, and all of a sudden your users start hammering the hell out of that script for some reason. Maybe it was some kind of like communication script or whatever. Again, you see this a lot in the technology world. Maybe somebody wrote a script in order to send out alerts using maybe, let's say, a Twilio API or something like that. They created the script, they told a couple of people, nobody cared. So it sat on the server, right? It sat on the server doing its thing, but like 3 people were using it. For some reason, a year or two go down the road, more and more people learn that this script is operating. They actually realize it's an amazing service, and now you have 500 people hitting a script, hitting a server that used to get 2 people per day. You may need to then move that script and all the packages along with it to a different server for security purposes or resource purposes or whatever else. And so if you can grab the script and you can grab the specific virtual environment and you can just pick it up and move it, that makes life very easy. Again, if you go to the scripts and then you have this huge list of packages, and you're trying to onesie-twosie figure out which ones you're supposed to move, that can make life a lot more difficult. So when I talk about production environments, that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. And again, it's important, again, in the real world, being a technology professional. On top of that, you have security concerns. Again, that gets a little weird with the virtual environments. I guess they are more secure, to be clear. Yes, they are more secure. How much more secure? That's an interesting question. But anyways, there's reasons to use virtual environments in the production world. Now, here's the thing. A lot of stuff that I do, I'm doing in an educational environment, or I'm doing in a test environment where I have machines that I wipe and reload and don't care about. I've literally got 15 MacBook Pros sitting in a cabinet over there. I can wipe and reload all day long. None of the scripts that I'm running are expected to last more than a week. much less years. Any of the scripts that I create, there is no plan for maintenance or to hand these damn things off to anybody else. And everything that I'm building in a timely manner. Again, if I build a server or if I show you any projects or anything, that's all getting built in a couple of weeks. This is not something that is taking years to build, right? So I'm not worried about different versions of Python modules. Basically, the one I install is the one that I need. And so for a lot of times in the classes that I create for you folks and something to be thinking about, I'm not going to be using virtual environments because this actually adds a level of complexity. Again, something to be thinking about with education is I want to teach you how to code in Python. There's a lot of other stuff that goes around being a technology professional that is very important, but that isn't necessarily what you need to be learning right now. So, like for me, when I do lab projects, I'm not using virtual environments. When I'm using stock standard modules, again, OpenAI, Beautiful Soup 4, these are modules that we'll be using over time. I'm most likely just going to install that directly onto the machine and not worry about virtual environments. There's a lot of time when adding the complexity of a virtual environment is actually a pain in the butt because the same thing is true with that kind of maintenance and remembering things. Again, remembering things. So if I create a script, and then I create a specific virtual environment for that script that has the modules. And then like I go on a vacation and then I come back and I forgot to document which virtual environment I'm supposed to use for that script that I wrote. And then I'm sitting there wasting half a day going, what freaking virtual environment am I supposed to use? Right? It can add some complexity. So with this, just one of those things to think about. Most likely in a production environment, you will use virtual environments. Outside of a production environment, there's a big question. One of the things that I will say, if you go to look for documentation, so if you look to how-to, so DigitalOcean actually has just wonderful white papers. They always assume you're using virtual environments. So one of the things I will tell you is if you go and you're reading somebody's white paper and you're trying to figure out the instructions to configure a server or to configure things, many times all of that information will be based on you using a virtual environment. So again, for simplicity's sake, you may want to create a virtual environment just so you're following along with what their instructions are and you're not having to modify things because you're not using a virtual environment. I don't know. That's just some stuff to be thinking about before you start using these things. So now we get to the exciting stuff, the tippy-tap typing, what you think being a tech professional is really all about. Right? If you're a noob, you still think typing on a computer is what your job is going to be all the time. You're not thinking about documentation or communicating with end users or meetings or any of that kind of stuff. But anyways, that excitement is for your future. But today, this is how we use venv. So the first question basically is going to be whether venv is installed on your computer. First thing you can do is actually try to create a virtual environment. I'm going to talk about that in a second to see if it works. If not, venv isn't installed, and you're going to need to install it. If you're using Ubuntu, sudo apt install python 3 -venv will install venv onto your computer, and then you can do everything else. If you're using Windows, if you're using Mac OS, if you're using Red Hat or whatever, basically go do a Google search and see what they say for how to install this. Again, that's one of the problems with doing online education versus in-person education. I have no idea what operating system you're using, distro you're using, updates you're using, or the whole nine yards, right? This is one thing you're going to have to figure out on your own. If venv isn't installed, you've got to figure out how to install it. And if you're like, Eli, I can't figure it out, then maybe you should be a florist. Maybe you should be a florist. I understand your frustration. I completely understand your frustration. That's our job. That's our job. I don't know. If you can't troubleshoot your own computer, what are you doing, right? Anyway, so this is how you're going to install it. Past that, basically, to create a virtual environment that we're going to use, you simply run Python 3. So Python 3. Now remember, there's Python 2, there's Python 3. Sometimes you type Python to get Python 3. Sometimes you type Python, it'll fail. Sometimes you type Python, you get version 2. So anyways, you'll notice for these classes, I'm almost always going to default to Python 3 or pip 3, even though I don't actually need it for Mac OS, just because that is one thing in your environment. If you call Python 3, you'll always get Python 3. Whereas if you do Python, depending on your operating system, you might get a different version of Python. So anyways, we're going to call Python 3 from the command line, and I'll show you this in a minute. We're going to do space -m. What this argument does is basically it says, run this module from Python 3. Pretty simple, right? So with modules, you can run modules right in the Python script. Here, you're saying straight from the command line, we're going to be running the venv module that has been installed, and we are going to create our own environment called test-venv. All right, Python 3 -m venv create this environment. Then once that's done, that's it. Basically, you get a folder. You get a folder with a folder structure with different stuff in there. So in order to actually activate the environment so that we're using it, you say source. So you actually state source space, whatever the environment name is, /bin/activate, and then you will notice that your prompt will now be different. And again, this is the important thing, especially when you get into the Linux world and you get the server worlds. Always pay attention to what the hell that prompt looks like, right? When you go into a shell or go into an environment, right, that prompt is going to change. So the Linux prompt looks different than the Python prompt, which looks different than the virtual environment prompt, which looks different than a MySQL prompt, and the whole 9 yards. So anyways, so when we do this, the prompt will change. From there, what we're going to be doing is we're going to list the packages installed within this virtual environment, which will be nothing, basically. We'll install a package, so you can see how that works. We'll list it again, and then we will deactivate. Pretty simple. So let's go over to the command line. So this is my command line here, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a directory. mkdir, I'm going to make a directory to make my life a little bit easier, and I'm just going to call this class-venv. Class-venv. Hit enter, right? So I've created that. Then I'm going to change directory into class-venv. And now we are in this folder. So from here, what I need to do is I need to create the virtual environment for today's class. So this is a folder. So this is simply a folder. Now I need to create the actual virtual environment. So to do that, again, I type in a Python 3. So we call Python 3 space -m, right? So run the module, venv, space, and then whatever this virtual environment is going to be. So let's call it my-venv, and then hit enter. It'll take a second, and then we have now created that environment. If I do ls-l, we will see that there is a folder, my-venv. I can actually change directories into that folder. I can do ls -l again, and we can see that there is a file structure, a bin, include, lib, this other stuff in there. So again, we're not really going to worry about that today. I just wanted you to see that those files were created. I'm going to go back up one level, cd .. That takes me back up to one level, and then I'm going to clear the screen. Okay, so now we are going to activate that particular virtual environment. So in order to do that, we do source space -my venv. So simply whatever your virtual environment name is. And so this is a file path. So again, if you're running this from some other folder, you've got to plug in the file path that's going to get you to where you need to go. /bin/activate, right? Okay, so source, virtual environment name, bin, activate. Again, this is simply a file path, so you would do this. Then notice, this is the prompt we have. I hit enter. Now notice, I have this my-venv path right here. So notice that this has changed. So if you're trying to figure out what's going on, do you see this or do you not? So if you need a virtual environment and you don't see something like this, you're not in the virtual environment. And if you don't want the virtual environment and you see something like this, then you're in the virtual environment and you need to get out. From here, we can just simply do pip3. So basically list list the packages that are currently installed. We do pip3 list, and we can see pip and setup tools. That's it. That is all the packages that are installed. This is a nice clean little box here. I can clear the screen, so simply do clear. From here, I can do pip3 install OpenAI. So we're going to be using OpenAI a lot. We've actually been using OpenAI quite a bit. So we're just simply going to install this package. We're going to hit enter. We're downloading. We're installing a lot of stuff. And one of the things you'll notice here, successfully installed, it actually installed quite a few different packages. Again, something to be thinking about from a security standpoint, from an auditing standpoint. You install OpenAI, what else did that install? So if we do clear, basically I can then do a pip3 list. So pip3 list the packages that are now currently installed. And if we go through, wow. So not only do we have OpenAI installed with whatever versions, you actually have a whole bunch of additional packages that are installed. And again, this is something that you need to be considered from a security standpoint, right? So if you're going to be the technical co-founder of a startup company and you're going to build out a project, one of the things that you need to do is you need to come in here and you need to figure out what every damn one of these modules does and verify it's not compromising your system or doing something that it shouldn't be doing, right? Because again, you had two packages, you installed a third package, and now you have 20 packages. Right, that's the kind of stuff that you really do have to be careful about. From there, right, so we are still in this particular virtual environment. Let me go back to VS Code and let's just create just a script, right? Print hello class. Right, so all we're going to do is we're going to print hello class. We're going to do file. We are going to do save as. And then when we go to do save as, we are going to go to my home folder. Then, what did I call this? Did I call this class venv? I think I called this class venv. So there's the my venv right there. So I will just call this, test.py, and then I will save. Then we will go back here to the command line, ls -l. We can now see that test.py is in this folder, and so I can simply run python 3 test.py, and it'll say hello class. Again, this is an introductory level class. We're not doing complicated things. All I'm trying to show you here is this. We called this script while we are in this virtual environment. So when this script ran, it had access to all the packages within this virtual environment, and then it ran, right? Again, nothing too complicated. Just kind of giving the idea of what's going on there. Past that, right? So we've done all of this. So we've created the virtual environment. We've activated the virtual environment. We've added a package to the virtual environment. We've listed the packages. Again, you can uninstall. So pip3 uninstall if you want to uninstall a package. And then from here, what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to get out. Get out. Again, one of the problems you can run into, in the Python world, in the Linux world, you get into something and you don't necessarily know how to get out of it. Oops. What did I just do? I just did something. Control C, Control X. Oops. Okay, so if you do exit, that just did that. Okay, so since I did a stoopy, Let me close out a quit terminal for a second. Let me quit terminal. Oh, look at that. I use Tunnel Bear. Okay, so here we are again. So ls -l. So I need a cd class venv to get back to my virtual environment. Okay, so so now you notice I'm at my normal prompt. Let me activate the virtual environment again. So source. What did I call this? Crap. What did I call it? LSL. Oops. LSL. I called it my venv. So then what I can do is I can do source space my venv. bin activate. Okay, so now I have activated this particular virtual environment. And so as you saw before, if you type exit, it just dumps you out everything, whatever. So what you really want to do here is you want to do deactivate. So I do deactivate, and then I hit enter. You will notice I go from this prompt to the normal prompt again. So I am now out of the virtual environment. Again, probably one of the biggest pains in the butt that you're really going to be dealing with, especially when you're new, is learning how to get out of stuff. Help! Get me out! I want out! And so simply knowing, again, do you type exit? Do you type deactivate? Do you do Control C? Do you do Control Q? Do you do Control X? How the hell do I get out of this damn thing? That's going to be one of the big important things for you to remember. And again, sometimes if you type the wrong command, you get something else that you don't want. So with venv, deactivate is the answer to get out of the virtual environment. Now, one of the cool things that you get out of venv is the ability to use the freeze command with pip3 to export all the packages that you're using to a requirements.txt file so that somebody else can take that requirements.txt file and then auto install all of the packages that you have already defined. Again, you need to be thinking about this in the real world. If somebody else is going to be maintaining your script, or if you're going to be migrating your script, going through and installing packages one by one is a very both an inefficient way of doing things and an error-prone way of doing things. So if you're going to be moving a script, from one system to another, what you can do is you can use freeze, dump all the package names into a requirements.txt file. You go to the new machine, you create a virtual environment or whatever else. You can then install all of the requirements as necessary, and it is pretty easy. So let's go over and take a look at our virtual environment again, right? So this is the same place we were before. We've got the my venv. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do source space my hyphen venv bin activate and hit enter. And so now we can see that the prompt has changed. And so I am in the my-venv environment. So if I do pip3 list, we can see all of the packages that are installed here. Let me also install another package just so you can see. So pip3 install feed parser. All right, so now it's installed the feed parser package. So I actually use this little combination, OpenAI with feed parser with a particular project that I'm doing. And so if I do pip3 list, we should see here that we've got feed parser somewhere, right? So we got OpenAI and everything else, and we've got feed parser, the whole 9 yards. So what if I want to take all the names and the versions of these packages and dump it into a requirements.txt file? So we do clear, and so all we're going to do is pip3 space freeze, and then we do the arrow, and we do requirements.txt. So that's just going to be a crappy little txt file. We're going to hit enter, and if we do ls-l, we now see that we have a requirements.txt file. This can be copied, pasted, move around as you want. It is simply a text file. So with that, let us get out of this particular virtual environment. So prompt is now back to the normal prompt, and so I'm normal now. So from here, let's create a new virtual environment. So let's say I've gone to an entirely different server somewhere else. I'm trying to create a new virtual environment for the script for the platform that we're creating. So from here, again, I can do Python 3 space -m. So run a module from Python 3, venv, and then we can say new venv, right? So we had my venv before. Now we're going to create new venv, new -venv, hit enter, and write ls-l. We see that new venv has been created. clear the screen. So from here, what I can do to activate the new venv is source space new hyphen venv bin activate, right? And so now I'm in the new hyphen venv virtual environment, not in the other one, right? So from here, I can do pip3 list, and we can see we have pip and we have setups tools installed, and that is it. So what we can do now is we can simply use the pip3 install space -r requirements.txt. We can use this command to install all the packages that are in that requirements file. So if I do, let's see, pip3 install -r requirements.txt. So pip3 normal install read from requirements.txt. I hit enter, right? It's going out. It's grabbing all of those packages. It's now actually installed all of that. Clear. Now if I do pip3 list, now in this new virtual environment, I now have feed parser installed, I have OpenAI installed, and then I have all of those additional packages installed, simply being able to use that requirements.txt. Now I know what you're thinking when you're looking at this with the requirements file. You're like, wow, that's all I'm ever going to use. That is so easy. And here's one of the things that I want you to think about if you're going to be a real technology professional. If you think something is going to be so easy, I'll just be blunt. You're probably not thinking about it right. So now if you have created your own virtual environment and you've audited it from time to time to make sure that it's fine, and you're simply migrating your script, your environment, let's say from one server to the other, you can probably, dare I say, trust it. Here's the thing though. What a lot of people do, again, in this open source world, they go off to Reddit or they go off to, whatever, one of these other sites. They see some project that somebody else did, and they went, wow, I should install that into my infrastructure, right? One of the things to be careful about with the requirements.txt file is if you use this, and basically if you use somebody else's requirements.txt file, they may install some weird crap onto your server. Again, as I've talked about before, one of the big problems with the whole open source community as far as modules are concerned within Python is that you have had hackers that have compromised tens of thousands of servers simply by creating a compromised package that has a very, very, very similar name to a legitimate package, and then they got tens of thousands of coders to install that onto their servers, right? So think about that. If they're able to get people to install these compromised packages simply by people fat fingering when they're typing in, imagine what a hacker can do if they simply give you a requirement.txt file and say, yeah, just run this. Just run this. It'll install everything you need. And everything that I need and everything the Russian government needs, so on and so forth. So do be careful with this. Again, as I always say, trust, verify, stay suspicious, or distrust, verify, stay suspicious. Again, in the security world, I started, again, got my degree in criminal justice, military, that kind of stuff. And they used to say is trust but verify. And it was like, well, that's stupid. Why would I ever trust anybody? Trust but verify. That literally just starts from the wrong place. No. Distrust, verify, stay suspicious. If somebody gives you the requirement.txt file, by all means use it after you verified what the hell is in it and looked for any kind of weird typos or anything like that, right? This is just an incredible vector for attack, especially when you have new coders that have access to somebody's infrastructure. So there you go. Now you understand venv. You have a basic idea of virtual environments in Python. You know how to create a venv environment. You know how to activate it. You know how to install packages into it. And you know how to, most importantly, deactivate, not exit, not queue, deactivate it, right? Past that, I showed you how to use that requirements.txt file, which again can be very, very valuable for being able to migrate, and especially when you're dealing with trusted people. But again, well, that's wrong because you're never going to deal with trusted people. It's kind of, again, it's one of those funny things. When you know you're dealing with somebody that you can trust, that just starts from the wrong place. You can't trust anybody. You can't trust anybody. I don't even trust myself. Let's be quite clear. When I say this, because some people get insulted, I don't trust myself. I can be shockingly stupid sometimes. So anyways, with that requirement.txt file, we talked about that, and we talked about the security, the possible vulnerabilities there. But again, that's a great way. If you just need to be able to move those specific packages somewhere else, that is a very easy way to do it. As long as you have security in mind. With these virtual environments, again, should you use them? This is the real world. I'm trying to teach you the real world, and in the real world, the answer is maybe not. I don't know. In your particular situation, it would either be stupid to use them or stupid not to use them. Here's a funny thing. It's your particular situation. Again, I would really be thinking about this if you're in the production environment. Most likely in production environment, use virtual environments. Again, not just for quote unquote safety and security, which, yes, it is more secure. How much more? Who the hell knows? But more for that maintainability, right? I really want to hammer into your head. You need to be designing infrastructure. You need to be writing code so that when you leave, you can hand everything over to somebody else and things will go seamlessly. Let me be very clear on who an imposter is, right? They talk about that in the tech world with imposter syndrome. Let me explain who an imposter is. If somebody leaves a company and nobody knows what the hell they were doing or how to continue to maintain their projects, that is an imposter. I do not care if they have a CCIE. I do not care if they have a PhD. I do not care if they have an award-winning podcast. It doesn't matter. If you leave and the people behind you are left in a god-awful position, that there means you failed. So you really have to be thinking about that. And that's one of the things that the virtual environments kind of make life a little bit easier. Also, again, when you're dealing with contractors or any of that type of thing, being able to wrap all this stuff up into a virtual environment can be very useful. Again, as I said before, though, depending on what you're doing and who you're doing it for, it might not matter much, right? The servers that I have here, if their operating systems last 3 months, that's doing a good job, right? Especially with things like Raspberry Pis at this point. You may deploy a Raspberry Pi maybe to do some like Nmap scanning or something, right? You use Python. You tie into Nmap in order to do some scanning or whatever else. You're not doing something very complicated. Again, going into virtual environments may actually overcomplicate what you're doing for whatever it is that you're doing. So that is just something that you have to consider. A lot of the stuff that we're going to be doing in classes, I'm going to leave out virtual environments simply because it's another step, frankly, for you to screw up. Here is what I have learned with 14 years of being a tech educator. Students will screw up everything you teach them. You're like, just follow these 10 steps, and then you'll find out every variation of ways people can screw up each and every one of those 10 steps, right? The more steps I give you, the more ways you'll screw up. So I'm probably not going to be doing a lot with venvs, virtual environments, simply because it's an additional step that keeps you away from dealing with files, that keeps you dealing with modules and other stuff, and can just overcomplicate things. Again, remember, if you're going to be a technology professional, most people do not fail. Again, I know right now, especially if you're taking this type of class, it seems over your head. You're like, oh my God, how am I ever going to do this? Here's the thing. Most people do not fail, right? Most people don't fail. Most people give up. Most people are working They think they're doing what I'm showing them. They're not. They forgot a comma somewhere. And so after 3 days of just hitting their head into the wall, they go, I'm stupid. I can't do it. No, you're not stupid. You're imprecise. Two entirely different things. Again, remember, to be a good technology professional, you actually don't have to be smart. You don't have to be smart. You have to be precise. Precise. Precision beats smart every damn day of the week. So anyways, one of the reasons we're not going to be doing venv a lot is simply it adds an extra step, and every step that I give you is far more opportunity for you to screw it up in new and inventive ways. But one of the things that I will warn you is, again, like with Django. So Django is a web app framework for Python, which is awesome. We'll be teaching you that at some point going in the future. One of the things I will tell you is when you go out and you're looking to deploy platforms or frameworks or whatever else, and you're looking at white papers, again, DigitalOcean actually does really good white papers, is most of the time they will assume you're using a virtual environment. So again, if you're going to deploy something somewhere and you're using somebody else's documentation, it might be far simpler just to create even if you're like, I don't need a virtual environment. Yeah, it might be simpler just to create that virtual environment, follow their instructions, and then go from there, right? Again, that's part of the thing with being a technology professional. Get it deployed. So anyways, there you go. There are some thoughts for the day, some final thoughts. Yeah. So as always, I enjoy teaching this particular class, and I look forward to seeing the next one.